How much do you really need to know before you become a part of the comic business? What I mean by that is if you're going to work there, either as a creator, an editor for one of the publishers, or open up a comic shop, or receive your comics from Diamond, is it daunting? What do you need to know? It turns out not that much. Hey everybody, this is Perch. I think I left off with that hook of not that much. The people are already moving their little mouse to the downvote button right with that one. But what I want to say there is that a lot is said. If you go to Comic Pro or you go to the retailer breakfast or a summit at one of the conventions, I was at the San Diego Comic Con, the retailer the breakfast. They don't call it a breakfast. It doesn't matter. At any rate, the early morning session, there was breakfast served, but it was not a good breakfast. It was a breakfast you're at your hotel and you're like, I could eat here, or I could go to a place with a bunch of other retailers and make awkward conversation and eat very crappy food. Like, why don't they just spend the money and like take everybody to a restaurant? That would be better, right? I mean, it would be about the same, I think. Your kid, sorry, I'm on a wrong track. Um, where did I go? The point here is that it's very easy for you to enter this business if you have a few things, but those things are not proprietary. You can only know by knowing somebody within comics. On the retailer side. Now, on the creator side is a little bit of a different story. We'll get to that in a minute. On the retailer side, you need to know business fundamentals first and foremost: how to manage a business, how to manage profit and loss. Local issues you're going to have to deal with your shop, how you're going to take deliveries. Did you pick a location in a small strip mall that doesn't allow deliveries at a certain time? Well, bad news. The mail service may do that to you from every now and then. How are you going to consider the ingestion of your stock and getting it out into shelves? Do you know how to file taxes? Do you have somebody who will do that for you? All these kinds of questions are very generic running a business questions, and there's a ton of those. But in terms of actually knowing the comic industry, it helps if you know the comic industry from a standpoint of this is Marvel, this is DC. A customer comes into your shop and you need to be educated on the product. But a question I often get from prospective, people who want to be retailers is, well, how much do I need to know about Diamond? And there's been some retailers who in the past have done these, I'll teach you an 8-week course on how to work with Diamond. And the reality is, if you can read and, read, you're probably okay. There's not like this special arcane mystical art of working for Diamond, or working with Diamond and putting your stuff in there. What is final order cutoff? What does that mean? You could just the description's there. I mean, you can it kind of is what it's the cutoff date for your final orders. I mean, what I'm saying here is that if you go and see some videos, and there's many of them, or you just read kind of the instructions on Diamond's site, you could probably figure that out. But a lot of people at least have this idea in their head that it's so complicated, so convoluted, really tough. You're going to have a really hard time even digesting what all this stuff means, that you can't, it's too hard to even begin. And that's not how it needs to be. That's not how it should be. So, like I said, comics are from a retailer perspective, you need strong business fundamentals. If somebody came to me and said, I know a lot about running a business, I know a lot about kind of filing taxes, I know a lot about local ordinances, I know a lot about kind of my location, the traffic, I've got some just good business sense, but I don't know anything about Diamond and distributors and Marvel reps and blah, blah, blah. I don't know anything about that. Should I, learn that stuff before I enter the comic world? The answer is no. I mean, go read and consume as much as you can. A good business person will do that. They'll try and educate themselves constantly. But this idea that you need to do more than that is a myth. You don't. Now, on the creator side, it's slightly a different story, but not really. There are definite mechanics to creating comics, getting a job in comics of all different, whether you're an artist, whether you're a writer, but it comes down to, again, fundamentals. Do you know how to pick up a phone? Do you know how to talk to somebody? Do you know how to send an email? Do you know how to scan pages? Do you know how to, not, spend 10 hours on, some digital piece of art and not save your work? Or when you do, you save it as a JPEG with low compression. I mean, there's a lot of like ins and outs where that's concerned. But what I've found as I've talked to people is actually knowledge of the business about how comics work. If you go to art school or you get a design degree and you kind of understand fundamentals of how to convert your work into digital, how to scan it, how to ink it, how to save it and export it, what the file formats, and you know how to use Dropbox and all this kind of stuff, then you'll be okay. What is different is that the comic business in the creator world, in the artist, writer, editor, getting a job in the company, it's heavily networked. Meaning it isn't necessarily what you know, it's who you know, and the who you know part's a major deal. Now that's where and it's interesting because the comic industry tends to be made up of a lot of not to use a stereotype, and I know this will offend some people. I apologize. I don't mean it negatively, but a lot of introverted type artists or creators, writers. They tend to. These aren't the people who are like, Mr. Popular in school. Not because they, weren't good people, but because they, that's not their personality. Their personality is not to go out and be the life of the party every time. The exception proves the rule. There's plenty who are, but generally speaking, a lot of people stick to themselves. You notice as you're seeing a lot of creators' homes while we're in COVID times. You'll notice it's like, hey, a lot of these people live out in the middle of nowhere. Well, yeah, they're living the dream. That's kind of how it is when they can. But so the networking piece is tough, I think, for a lot of people. So getting that skill, getting that ability to, meet some editors, have a good reputation, do all the rest. It's why there is some truth to the statement of, well, if you go really in on, say, a movement, like the comment has been made. Okay, if you're really heavily involved in Comicsgate, you can kiss working in the industry goodbye. And the truth to that is, yeah, you are definitely going to offend some circles, some people, some groups within the network where you're not, it's a who you know. They know you as being a certain thing. It's not a thing they like. You will struggle to get work with them. That is true. However, that doesn't mean you're blocked out of the whole industry. It means you're blocked out of certain parts of the industry. It means you're blocked out by certain people. As we've seen with comics, there's lots of room for all kinds of different personalities and views. And this exists long before Comicsgate. This has just been true for decades. There's always been groups of people who go to different places and do different things, and they bring their networks with them, and that's just kind of how it is. I think the myth, which, by the way, in current times, both the Comicsgate and the anti-Comicsgate both kind of perpetuate, is that they're more of a gatekeeper than they are. I mean, definitely people act as gatekeepers, and they all do it to their own respects. Again, for decades this has been going on. This isn't new, but you get to a place where you will have a really hard time, depending on who your friends are. You will have an easier time in some places and a harder time in other places. And before anybody gets too much into the Comicsgate, anti-Comicsgate, whatever it was before that, we need to come up with some terms like what. I'll work on that. Before you get into that, what I've just described is true for almost everything. It's certainly true in Hollywood with different entertainment properties. You have different circles, different groups, different networks. It's true within technology. You get groups of people at Microsoft versus Amazon versus Google versus Facebook. And there's always kind of this network behavior. This is not new. It's so striking in comics because comics is relatively small, so therefore it is easy to kind of pick up and detect who's in what clique, because it's a small enough pool. You can see it. It's also, there's not enough money in it, so like 90s pro wrestling, people are hopping sides from time to time, and you're getting heel turns and face turns and factions forming and all the rest. And that activity is more on display in comics based on what it is. So all in all, though, I guess my message here is, if you want to work in comics, you want to be a part of comics, you want to, however it is, retailer, creative, everything else, go for it. Don't let anybody tell you that there's some magical wall that you can never get past unless you do this or that, or you know this very arcane specialized knowledge. You can do it. It is open to you. And if you have certain, and by the way, some people say, well, it's not completely true because there are gatekeepers who keep certain people with political views out. That's true. There are certainly areas where, if you believe one thing, or you have these types of friends, or you do this hashtag, or whatever it happens to be, you will struggle in certain areas. But other areas will then be open for you. Don't let that become a barrier to doing nothing. That's my, the clear message I want to provide here is, don't let this idea that you're going to get blocked prevent you from starting in the first place. You got to get started. You got to, there is room for you somewhere. Find that somewhere and go for it. That's what you should be doing. That is, as they say in The Mandalorian, that is the way. There you go. Super nerdy is me. All right. Well, thank you very much. Let me know your comments and thoughts below on what we're talking about. Otherwise, subscribe, recommend to a friend, do whatever you have to do. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch, and thanks for listening.